On our 10th anniversary dinner, my husband's father suddenly stood up and accused me of stealing his $20,000 Rolex. "Check her purse," he demanded. My husband, without hesitation, snatched my bag and dumped it out in front of all our guests. When nothing was found, he sneered, "She probably hid it already." That's when I noticed his mistress smirking by the dessert table. "Check her purse." The accusation thundered across the private dining room, freezing every guest mid-conversation. My father-in-law's face had turned an alarming shade of crimson as he jabbed his finger toward me. "She stole my Rolex. $20,000 sitting right there on my wrist not 30 minutes ago." I stood paralyzed, champagne flute trembling in my hand, as 50 pairs of eyes swiveled in my direction. The room that moments before had hummed with anniversary congratulations now pulsed with uncomfortable silence. Before I could even form a defense, Isaac was beside me, his expression unreadable. "Dad, are you sure?" he asked, but there wasn't a trace of doubt in his voice. Then, without warning, Isaac snatched my designer clutch from the table beside me. Our eyes met for just a second, long enough for me to see there was no hesitation, no faith, no decade of trust between us. With a swift motion that seemed practiced, he appended the contents across the pristine white tablecloth. Lipstick, house keys, phone, wallet, tissues. My private life scattered like confetti before our closest friends and family. Nothing resembling a watch appeared among my belongings. "She probably hid it already," Isaac sneered, his voice carrying to every corner of the stunned room. That's when I noticed her, standing by the dessert table, champagne in hand, lips curved in a satisfied smirk that confirmed everything I had suspected for months. 2 weeks earlier, I had been a wife planning the perfect anniversary celebration. The Rosewood restaurant had required booking 6 months in advance, but I'd wanted everything to be flawless for our milestone. I'd selected a 5-course menu featuring Isaac's favorites: the truffle risotto he'd fallen in love with on our honeymoon in Italy, the seared scallops that reminded him of our first Valentine's Day. Each detail had been considered, from the jazz quartet playing our wedding song to the custom photo timeline of our decade together displayed in the entryway. I'd spent 3 hours at the salon getting my hair done in loose waves, the style Isaac had always complimented. My midnight blue dress, bought specially for this occasion, had cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing, but I'd justified it as an investment in our marriage, in the moment, in us. The guest list had been carefully curated. 30 of our closest friends, Isaac's colleagues from the architectural firm, my fellow teachers from Westridge Elementary and immediate family. People who had witnessed our love story unfold, who had supported us through the early financial struggles, the miscarriage 3 years ago, the rebuilding of our relationship afterward. Isaac's father, Richard, had always been a dominating presence in our marriage. A self-made real estate developer with the subtle warmth of concrete in January, he had never quite approved of me. "Teachers don't understand business," he'd once told Isaac within my earshot at a family barbecue. "They live in fantasy worlds where everyone gets a gold star." His approval meant everything to Isaac, who had joined his father's business despite his passion for residential architecture. Richard arrived 40 minutes late to our anniversary dinner, making an entrance in his custom-tailored suit, Italian leather shoes clicking authoritatively against the hardwood floor. He'd embraced Isaac firmly, clapping him on the back before turning to me with a perfunctory air kiss that deliberately missed my cheek. I noticed his flashy Rolex immediately. He always made sure everyone did, twisting his wrist just so when he reached for his whiskey. 10 years, he'd said, raising his glass. Longer than I gave it, I'll admit. Several guests had laughed nervously, mistaking the jab for a toast. The first warning sign that something was terribly wrong came when Isaac disappeared for 20 minutes during the appetizer course. "Just taking a call from the Portland client," he'd whispered, but his cologne lingered after he slipped away. The Portland project had been completed 2 months ago. The second red flag appeared when I noticed a woman I didn't recognize chatting with Richard. She wasn't on my meticulously prepared guest list, yet she moved through the space with the confidence of belonging. Tall, with sleek auburn hair and a dress that suggested careful selection rather than special occasion panic buying, she caught Isaac's eye across the room in a way that made my stomach clench. "Who invited Amanda?" I'd asked my sister-in-law Bethany, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, she's the new marketing director at the firm," Bethany replied, her eyes darting away too quickly. "Richard probably brought her as his +1. By the time we reached the main course, Isaac had barely spoken 3 sentences to me. He circulated through our guests, charming and attentive to everyone but his wife. When it came time for speeches, his words felt rehearsed, hollow. A public performance of affection rather than its genuine expression. Then came dessert. Richard had excused himself to the restroom. Upon his return, his accusatory bellow had shattered any pretense of celebration. Now, with my personal items splayed across the table and no watch in sight, I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the weight of every judgmental stare, every whispered doubt. "I never took your watch, Richard," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the crushing pressure in my chest. "Who else would have?" he demanded. "You've always been jealous of what this family has. A schoolteacher's salary can't buy Rolexes." Isaac didn't defend me. The man who had promised to stand by me through better or worse stood silent while his father questioned my character, my integrity, my worth. Worse, he joined in, ransacking my purse without a second thought, humiliating me before everyone we knew. In that crystalline moment of betrayal, I understood that our marriage had been an elaborate performance, one where I alone had been unaware of the script. The anniversary celebration, like our vows, had been meaningless. The truth stood mockingly before me in the form of Amanda, whose smirk told me she knew exactly where Richard's watch had gone. "Check the security footage," I said quietly. "Check the security footage," I said quietly. The words hung in the air but no one moved. As I stood amid the wreckage of my personal belongings, time seemed to stretch and contract. My mind wasn't on the humiliation of the present but drifting through the echoes of the past, to when I first met Isaac Morgan, long before he became the man who could dump my purse without a second thought. 12 years ago, I was teaching 3rd grade at Westridge Elementary when a pipe burst in the ceiling, flooding 3 classrooms including mine. The school district hired Morgan Construction to handle the repairs. Isaac arrived with blueprints tucked under his arm and a smile that reached his eyes. He spent extra time designing built-in bookshelves for my classroom's reading corner. "Something the kids will remember," he'd said. He asked me out over a discussion about children's literature. I'd mentioned how my students loved Charlotte's Web and he confessed he'd never read it. The following week he showed up with a dog-eared copy post-its marking his favorite parts. "I never understood why school made reading feel like work when it could feel like this," he'd said. I fell in love with his curiosity, his eagerness to see the world through new eyes. Our early years glowed with the warmth of genuine connection. Isaac would leave sticky notes in my lunch bag with quotes from books he was reading. We spent Sundays at farmers' markets, planning meals we'd cook together. He listened, really listened, when I talked about my students' breakthroughs or struggles. The construction business was his father's dream, but Isaac's passion emerged when he sketched residential designs on napkins during our dinner dates. "Someday," he'd whisper, "I'll build us a home with a classroom just for you. Windows facing east for morning light, shelves for all your books, and a garden where you can teach outdoors in spring." Our wedding was intimate. 60 guests in his cousin's backyard. Richard's only comment was that we could have had a proper venue, if we'd accepted his offer to pay. Isaac had insisted on covering costs ourselves. "This is our life, not his investment," he'd said with a conviction I admired. The shift came so gradually I barely noticed it happening. 3 years in, Isaac joined his father's executive team. The sticky notes became less frequent, replaced by late nights at the office. Our Sunday traditions faded as client meetings increasingly filled weekends. His sketches of dream homes gathered dust. "It's temporary," he'd assure me. "Dad's grooming me to take over one day. Then we can do things differently." By year 5, Isaac's closet held suits instead of jeans. His vocabulary filled with terms like leverage and capital investment. He stopped asking about my students. When I shared classroom stories, his responses became perfunctory. "That's great, babe," his attention never leaving his phone. The miscarriage during our 7th year created a chasm between us. After 3 days at home, Isaac returned to work while I remained hollow, adrift in grief. "Life has to go on," he'd said, as if losing our child was simply an unfortunate scheduling conflict. That night, I heard him on the phone laughing at something I couldn't hear. I realized then that the man I married was disappearing, molecule by molecule, replaced by someone with his face but not his heart. Looking back, the first tangible clue of his infidelity arrived last September. Isaac had always been methodical about his laundry. Dark suits in the dry cleaning pile, workout clothes in the hamper. But one Tuesday evening I found his dress shirt crumpled in the bathroom trash, the collar smeared with lipstick 2 shades bolder than anything I owned. Must have brushed against someone at the conference, he explained without meeting my eyes. Then came the password changes on his phone and laptop, the hushed calls that ended abruptly when I entered a room, the unexplained weekend site visits, from which he returned smelling of unfamiliar perfume. A credit card statement delivered to our home instead of his office revealed dinner charges at restaurants we'd never visited together. Always for two, always on Tuesday evenings. I could have confronted him. The old Layla would have demanded answers, would have fought for our marriage with the same determination I showed when advocating for a struggling student. But this new Layla, shaped by years of subtle dismissals and gradual erasure, chose a different path. Know everything before you show anything, my grandmother used to say. So I watched and waited, noting every inconsistency, every lie, every moment his actions contradicted his words. I became a researcher in my own life, documenting the evidence of its unraveling. In February, Isaac announced renovations for his home office, a space to focus without distractions. He hired contractors I'd never met and insisted I respect his privacy by staying out of the room during and after construction. The work took 3 weeks, during which strangers trampled through our home while Isaac was conveniently absent. After the renovation, Isaac's study remained perpetually locked. He claimed it contained sensitive client information, but the keypad installation seemed excessive for residential construction blueprints. One afternoon while he attended a city planning meeting, I noticed a small delivery box in our recycling bin, empty packaging for a high-end security system. Curiosity led me to our online shopping accounts. Nothing there. But when I logged into his business expense account, using the password that hadn't changed since our marriage, his childhood dog's name, I found the purchase. A comprehensive surveillance system with multiple cameras, installed during the renovation. The invoice description read, security installation for home office protection, 4 corner point cameras with cloud storage and remote access. 4 cameras in one room seemed excessive. The question wasn't whether Isaac was hiding something but what, and from whom. Was he monitoring the house when he was away? Or was this another layer of secrecy in our increasingly compartmentalized lives? I found my answer 3 weeks later. While Isaac showered, I used his tablet to check movie times. A notification flashed across the screen, motion detected in study. Without thinking, I tapped it. The app requested a PIN which I correctly guessed on my second try, the date Richard had made him partner. The screen displayed 4 different angles of Isaac's study in crystal clear definition. In that moment I realized the cameras weren't to keep people out. They were to preserve what happened inside. And that's when I began planning how I might access the footage, never imagining it would one day become my salvation at our anniversary dinner. Accessing the security footage required careful planning. Isaac's predictable schedule became my greatest advantage. Tuesday client dinners, Thursday golf with his father, Saturday morning gym sessions followed by site visits that mysteriously lasted until evening. I created a calendar tracking his movements, identifying patterns that would give me uninterrupted time with his security system. Thursday mornings proved ideal. Isaac left by 7 for breakfast with Richard before their standing tea time at Willow Creek Country Club. They wouldn't return until after 2, giving me hours alone with the study door and its electronic keypad. The lock itself presented the first challenge. After 3 failed attempts, the system would trigger a notification to Isaac's phone. I couldn't risk guessing wrong. I spent weeks observing which keys showed fingerprint smudges, noting how he positioned his hand when entering. One morning, I deliberately spilled coffee near his briefcase and while helping him clean up, watched from the corner of my eye as he entered the code. 3-6-1-9-7. Our wedding date followed by his lucky number. The irony wasn't lost on me. With the code secured, I waited for the perfect Thursday. It came in March when Isaac mentioned his golf game with Richard would be followed by drinks with potential investors. I'd have at least 8 hours. Once his car disappeared down our tree-lined street, I gave myself 30 additional minutes in case he forgot something. Then, heart pounding against my ribs, I approached his study. The keypad blinked green on my first attempt. The door swung open to reveal a room I barely recognized. Gone were the warm wooden bookshelves that once held novels we'd discussed over Sunday coffee. Instead, glass and chrome dominated the space. A statement of modern masculinity that felt nothing like the man I'd married. I located the security system's control panel hidden behind a false drawer in his desk. The interface asked for the same PIN used on his tablet. My hands trembled slightly as I entered it, half expecting alarms to sound. Instead, the screen illuminated with file folders organized by date. Working backward, I opened the most recent Tuesday folder and randomly selected a timestamp from the evening. The video loaded, showing Isaac's empty study. I fast-forwarded until movement caught my eye. Isaac entered, followed by a woman, the same auburn-haired woman who would later stand by our anniversary dessert table. They were laughing about something I couldn't hear. The system recorded video but not audio. She perched casually on his desk as if she'd done it 100 times before. He stood between her knees, hands resting on her thighs with easy familiarity. I watched, stomach churning, as they kissed with the comfort of established lovers, not the urgent passion of a new affair. Then came the moment that shattered whatever remaining illusions I held about our marriage. Isaac walked to the wall safe hidden behind an abstract painting. A safe I didn't know existed in a home I thought we shared. From it he removed a small red box. Inside gleamed a diamond bracelet that caught the light as he fastened it around her wrist. The intimacy of the gesture, the way his fingers lingered on her skin, the practiced ease of the clasp, told me everything. This wasn't a first gift. This wasn't a beginning. I closed the video, unable to watch more. With mechanical precision I began checking other Tuesday evenings, confirming a pattern that stretched back months. Some nights they didn't appear, suggesting they'd found alternative meeting places. Other nights they worked late at his desk, heads bent together over blueprints. Colleagues to any observer except one who recognized the unnecessary touches, the lingering glances. The technical challenge of preserving this evidence without leaving digital footprints required research. I couldn't simply email the files to myself. The system would log it. Instead, I purchased a high-capacity external drive, using cash at an electronics store 30 miles from our neighborhood. I downloaded weeks of footage, focusing on key moments that proved the relationship's duration and nature. The hardest part wasn't finding the evidence, it was living with it. Each morning I'd kiss Isaac goodbye, knowing I'd watched him kiss her the same way. I'd ask about his day, knowing which parts he'd fabricate. The performance drained me, but I refused to break character until I held all the pieces. "You're quiet lately," Isaac commented one evening as we prepared dinner. "Everything okay at school?" "Just focused on end-of-year assessments," I replied, chopping vegetables with precise movements, wondering if he noticed how my hands shook. "You know how it gets." He nodded without looking up from his phone. "Don't stress too much. It's just elementary school." Just elementary school. Another dismissal of my passion, my profession. Once it would have stung. Now it was merely another brick in the wall I was building between us. A wall he didn't yet realize existed. The weeks approaching our anniversary required particular vigilance. I maintained a calm facade while assembling the evidence I needed. The final piece came unexpectedly, 1 week before our celebration. Isaac's father visited on a Tuesday afternoon. Unusual, as their meetings typically occurred at Richard's office or the country club. I arrived home early from a professional development day, letting myself in quietly through the side door. Voices from Isaac's study carried down the hallway. I recognized Richard's authoritative tone, followed by Isaac's placating one. Curious, I remained still, listening. 10 years is long enough, Richard was saying. This charade has served its purpose. Morgan Construction has the school district contracts thanks to your marriage to a teacher. We don't need her connections anymore. I know, Dad. It's all arranged. Amanda's already looking at condos for us. And the anniversary dinner? The perfect public ending. Amanda will be there. You'll bring the Rolex. And accidentally discover it's missing during dessert, Richard finished. You'll check her purse, find nothing, but the seed will be planted. Everyone will question her integrity. By next week she'll be out of our lives and the narrative will be clear. She was never good enough for the Morgan name. I retreated silently, my entire body numb. Their plan stripped away any lingering doubt about what I needed to do. The anniversary dinner wouldn't be their stage, it would be mine. The final challenge involved the restaurant's projection system. 3 days before our celebration, I visited the Rosewood under the pretense of confirming floral arrangements. While the manager reviewed centerpiece options, I casually mentioned a video montage of our decade together. We have everything set up for multimedia presentations, he assured me. HDMI connection, projection screen, full sound system. Just bring your device and our staff can help connect it. I nodded, mentally adding one more item to my preparation list. I would arrive early, check the equipment and ensure everything functioned perfectly. For once, Isaac's tendency to arrive fashionably late would work in my favor. The night before our anniversary, I packed 2 purses. The blue clutch Isaac expected and a larger tote containing my evidence. I saved the most damning video to multiple devices and rehearsed my timing. Whatever happened, I would not leave that dinner without the truth being known. The anniversary dinner progressed exactly as I'd predicted. I arrived 45 minutes early, my larger tote bag containing both the external drive and a USB flash drive with a single carefully selected video file. The restaurant manager helped me test the projection system, and I left the flash drive discreetly connected, ready for its moment. Everything's perfect, Mrs. Morgan, he assured me. Just press this button on the remote when you're ready to start your presentation. I slipped the remote into my midnight blue clutch, the one Isaac would later empty across the table, and waited in composed silence as guests arrived. Each congratulatory hug felt like an embrace with a ghost. Each happy anniversary, like a eulogy for something already dead. Now, standing amid the wreckage of my personal belongings scattered across the white tablecloth, I felt strangely calm. The last 10 years had been building to this moment. Not the humiliation they'd planned, but the revelation I'd prepared. She probably hid it already, Isaac sneered, his voice carrying across the stunned room. My lipstick had rolled toward Richard, stopping against his whiskey glass. My house keys lay tangled with tissues. My wallet gaped open, revealing family photos Isaac hadn't looked at in years. The remote control sat partially hidden beneath my phone. I lifted my eyes to meet Amanda's gaze across the room. She stood by the dessert table, champagne flute poised at her lips, satisfaction playing across her features. She wore an emerald dress that highlighted her auburn hair, and around her wrist, visible even from a distance, sparkled a diamond bracelet I recognized from the security footage. But there was something else I noticed as well. On her empty ring finger was a thin indentation where a band would normally sit. She'd removed it for the occasion, but not quite long enough for the mark to fade. This wasn't just an affair. This was a parallel life. I never took your watch, Richard, I repeated, my voice steady despite the ache spreading through my chest. You've always been jealous of what this family has, he countered. Always wanting more than a schoolteacher deserves. My sister-in-law Bethany shot me a sympathetic glance before lowering her eyes. My closest friend Elena half rose from her seat, clearly intending to defend me, but I caught her eye and gave an imperceptible shake of my head. This was my moment and I would handle it my way. A Rolex is quite distinctive, I said, reaching slowly for my phone and the remote beneath it. Perhaps we should check if anyone saw where it went. Stop stalling, Isaac snapped. Everyone here knows what happened. I looked around the room at everyone. Friends who'd attended our wedding, colleagues who'd supported our careers, family who'd witnessed our vows. Did they believe I was capable of theft? Their uncomfortable expressions suggested they weren't certain what to think. I agree completely, I said, straightening my shoulders. Everyone should know exactly what happened. With deliberate movements, I picked up the remote and walked toward the front of the room where the projection screen hung. Isaac's eyes narrowed as he watched me, confusion replacing his earlier certainty. What are you doing? He demanded. Providing evidence, I replied, pressing the button. The lights automatically dimmed as the projector hummed to life. The screen filled with the familiar interior of Isaac's study. The glass desk, the chrome shelving, the abstract painting hiding his secret safe. The timestamp in the corner read 1:42 p.m., March 28th. Last Tuesday, just 3 days ago. A collective murmur rippled through the guests as Isaac appeared on screen, loosening his tie as he entered the room. He checked his watch, Richard's Rolex gleaming on his wrist, before making a phone call. She's in the meeting, he said to someone off-screen. You can come over. The room fell deathly silent as Amanda entered the frame minutes later. They embraced with the familiarity of longtime lovers. Isaac led her to the couch, where they sat discussing something with animated gestures. Then Isaac stood, removing Richard's Rolex from his wrist. Dad never wears this anymore anyway, he said, the words clearly visible on his lips despite the lack of audio. He'll blame Layla if he notices it's gone. Win-win. Amanda laughed, accepting the watch from him and slipping it into her purse, the same small clutch she now held by the dessert table. The footage continued, showing Isaac opening the hidden safe and removing a small jewelry box. Inside was a ring, not a bracelet this time, which he placed on Amanda's finger. She admired it briefly before removing it and tucking it away. Just until next week, he mouthed clearly. After the anniversary. I pressed pause, freezing the image of them embracing on the screen. The timestamp showed the footage had been recorded at 2:17 p.m. on Tuesday, the exact time Richard claimed to have last seen his watch. The silence in the room was absolute. 50 pairs of eyes swiveled from the screen to Amanda, whose smirk had vanished, then to Isaac, whose face had drained of all color, and finally to Richard, who looked thunderstruck. Check her purse, I suggested quietly, echoing Richard's earlier demand. The green Prada clutch by the dessert table. For several heartbeats no one moved. Then Elena stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and walked purposefully toward Amanda. My friend's expression was thunderous as she reached for the purse. Don't you dare, Amanda hissed, clutching it to her chest. Either you open it or I will, Elena stated flatly. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. Amanda's eyes darted to Isaac, silently pleading for intervention, but he remained frozen in place, speechless for perhaps the first time in his life. Richard had sunk back into his chair, his complexion ashen. After a moment of tense standoff, Amanda reluctantly opened her clutch. Elena reached in and withdrew the gleaming Rolex, holding it up for all to see. The watch caught the light, its diamond-encrusted face glittering accusingly. I believe this belongs to you, Mr. Morgan, Elena said, walking the watch to Richard and placing it on the table before him. My fingers trembled slightly as I pressed another button on the remote, advancing to the next clip. Isaac and Amanda again, but this time discussing their plans for after the anniversary dinner. Their silent movie conversation played out for all to witness, their lips forming words that were now unmistakable. Divorce, settlement, reputation, school board connections. A hand touched my shoulder gently. Bethany stood beside me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I suspected, but I never knew, not all of this. From the corner of my eye, I saw Richard rise unsteadily from his seat. His face had transformed from shock to rage, his attention fixed not on me but on his son. You took my watch? He growled, advancing toward Isaac. You were going to let me believe. Dad, I can explain, Isaac began, backing away slightly. You used my Rolex in your scheme? My watch. It struck me then how telling his reaction was. Not outrage at his son's betrayal of his marriage vows, but anger over the unauthorized borrowing of his luxury timepiece. As the Morgan family drama unfolded, I noticed our guests beginning to gather their belongings. Some approached me with awkward expressions of sympathy. Others slipped away without making eye contact. The perfect anniversary celebration I'd planned was dissolving around me, but I felt only relief as the weight of deception lifted from my shoulders. I switched off the projector and turned to face what remained of our anniversary dinner. The scattered contents of my purse, the half-eaten meals, the melting desserts, and the crumbling facade of my marriage. I gathered my scattered belongings from the tablecloth methodically, one by one, preserving what little dignity remained in the situation. Lipstick, keys, wallet, phone. Each item returned to my clutch represented a piece of myself I was reclaiming. The anniversary dinner had transformed from celebration to crime scene, with truth as the victim resurrected. Layla. Isaac's voice cracked as he approached me, his father still berating him in the background. This isn't what it looks like. I met his eyes, searching for any remnant of the man who had once built bookshelves for my students. All I found was desperation, not for forgiveness but for damage control. It's exactly what it looks like, I replied quietly. It's what it's been for a long time. Elena appeared at my side, car keys already in hand. I'm taking you home, she said, not a question but a statement. My home, not yours. Across the room, Amanda was attempting to slip away unnoticed. Richard's thundering voice stopped her at the door. The watch and the ring, he demanded, hand outstretched. Family heirlooms don't walk out with mistresses. The diamond bracelet, however, remained on her wrist, apparently not valuable enough to reclaim. My third-grade colleague Marissa approached, eyes brimming with indignation. "The school board meeting is Tuesday," she whispered. "Consider your job safe." I hadn't even thought about how Isaac and Richard might use their connections to retaliate against my career, but Marissa already had my back. As Elena guided me toward the exit, Isaac made one final attempt, grabbing my arm. "You can't just leave. We need to talk about this." "Actually, I can." I removed his hand as I would direct a misbehaving student, firmly but without drama. The talking was supposed to happen years ago. Tonight was just the punctuation. The cool April air hit my face as we stepped outside, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms from the restaurant's courtyard. I inhaled deeply, feeling oxygen reach parts of me that had been suffocating for years. "You planned all of that?" Elena asked as she drove through the quiet streets of our suburb. "The projection, the timing, everything?" "I had 3 different versions ready depending on how the evening unfolded," I admitted. "I never expected Richard to make it so easy with the watch accusation. That was serendipitous." Elena's guest room became my sanctuary for the next 2 weeks. While Isaac blew up my phone with alternating threats and pleas, I met with a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial deception. Barbara Winters had steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "The security footage is gold," she said during our first consultation. "Not just for proving infidelity, which frankly courts see every day, but for documenting conspiracy to damage your reputation and career. That's malice, and judges notice malice." Isaac's desperate attempts to salvage his image escalated. First came flowers delivered to Elena's house, arrangements I'd mentioned liking years ago, proving he'd once listened. Then came a handwritten letter listing memories from our early years, as if nostalgia could erase betrayal. When these failed, he enlisted mutual friends to plead his case. "He says it was just one mistake," our neighbor Jim reported awkwardly when I ran into him at the grocery store. "The mistake wasn't the affair," I replied, selecting a carton of eggs. "It was thinking I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, or wouldn't respond." 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I returned to our house while Isaac was at work to collect my personal belongings. Bethany insisted on accompanying me. "He changed the locks," she warned me beforehand. "But I have a key." The home I entered felt like a museum of someone else's life. Family photos still hung on walls, but they captured moments I now questioned. Had he been sincere in any of them? Had that vacation smile been genuine, or had he been texting Amanda when I looked away? In the bedroom I packed clothes, jewelry, and books. In my classroom office I gathered teaching materials and student mementos. I left wedding albums, gifts from Isaac's family, and anything purchased with joint funds. The divorce proceedings would sort out property, but some disconnections needed to happen immediately. As I packed my grandmother's quilt, I found myself oddly calm. The anger would come later in unexpected waves, while driving, while grading papers, while shopping for groceries. But in that moment I felt only clarity. "You're handling this with such grace," Bethany said, helping me carry boxes to Elena's car. "I'd be a wreck." "This isn't grace," I corrected her. "It's self-preservation." Word of the anniversary revelation spread throughout our community. Parents of my students stopped me in hallways to offer support. "My daughter adores you," one mother said. "We're on your side." The principal assured me my position was secure, regardless of whatever pressure the Morgan family might apply to the school board. Richard attempted damage control by donating generously to the school's building fund, a transparent effort to maintain influence. The check was accepted, but the naming opportunity he'd clearly expected didn't materialize. 6 months after our anniversary, the divorce was finalized. I received a fair settlement, partly due to Barbara's skillful negotiation and partly due to Isaac's desire to avoid further public embarrassment. The security footage proved more valuable than any prenuptial agreement. I used part of the settlement to place a down payment on a small craftsman bungalow 3 neighborhoods away, close enough to keep my teaching position, far enough to avoid casual encounters with the past. The house needed work, which became my evening therapy. I painted walls, refinished floors, and planted a garden that would bloom in seasons to come. Elena helped me host a housewarming party that doubled as a reclamation of friendship. Some mutual friends had chosen sides after the divorce, mostly Isaac's, drawn by social connections to his family's wealth. Their absence created space for deeper bonds with those who remained. To new beginnings, Marissa toasted, raising her glass in my sunny backyard. I added, and to the endings that make them possible. 1 year after the anniversary dinner, I received an unexpected visitor. Bethany stood on my porch, shifting uncomfortably. Isaac and Amanda broke up, she said. He wanted me to tell you he's changed. He's in therapy. I invited her in for coffee, appreciating her loyalty to her brother despite everything. I'm glad he's getting help, I said sincerely. But my life isn't on pause waiting for his character development. That life had expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd started teaching creative writing workshops for adults at the community center. I'd adopted a rescue dog named Bronte who accompanied me on hiking trails I'd always wanted to explore but never had time for during my marriage. I'd reconnected with a college friend whose theater company needed help designing sets, a creative outlet that brought unexpected joy. The woman who had spent a decade accommodating her husband's ambitions now made decisions based solely on her own interests. The teacher who had focused on others' growth now nurtured her own. The wife who had ignored warning signs now trusted her instincts implicitly. You know what the strangest part is? I confided to Elena on the anniversary of my divorce. I'm actually grateful. Grateful? She echoed incredulously. For what he did. Not for what he did, I clarified. For what it made me do. Pay attention, gather evidence, stand up for myself. I could have spent another decade in that slow-motion disappearing act. Instead, I found myself. The security footage that had exposed the truth now existed only in legal records. I'd deleted all personal copies, not out of forgiveness but because holding on to evidence of betrayal meant keeping it alive in my daily thoughts. The past had served its purpose as teacher. It didn't need to remain as companion. That night, I sat on my porch swing watching fireflies illuminate the garden I had planted with my own hands. The light they cast was intermittent but persistent. Brief moments of brilliance in the darkness, continuing their display whether anyone witnessed it or not. I found myself smiling at their quiet metaphor for resilience.